Well, here's all the bits and pieces back from the painter. I already started putting the bucket cylinder back on the stick, but I'm going to take that all apart again. So let's get back to putting this back together. First, we'll finish the control valve off. I'll probably just put it on time lapse for one section of the valve, or maybe two, because there really is nothing to it. But that way at least you guys can see it. So let's get to work. Okay, so while this is apart, I thought I'd show you guys how this works. So this here is the spool valve assembly itself. This is what actuates or diverts your hydraulic flow from one end of the cylinder or motor to the other. And it sits in this opening right here. It actually sits this way with the spring on the bottom. And what happens is the oil comes in one of these passages here. I'm not exactly sure which. And then depending on which way you shift the spool, it'll either send it out this opening or that opening. And then this opening here and this opening here get connected to the other side, which returns the oil to the tank. Now, this is called a spool valve because rather unimaginatively, it resembles a spool like what you would wind twine on to put onto a sewing machine. So they came up with the name spool valve. Now this opening, I'll just put this aside. This opening right here is where the port relief goes. And this is what the port relief is right here. And its purpose is to prevent overpressurization. It just threads in there like that. It's to prevent overpressurization of this port here. So if you have an excessive load on there for some reason, like if you're digging something really hard and it's pulling the boom down, for example, into the trench more, there's going to be a corresponding increase in pressure here. Now, in order to keep from blowing hydraulics lines or something, that pressure needs somewhere to go. And once it reaches the preset of this here pressure relief valve, it just allows that oil, instead of going through the spool valve, it just allows it to go right back to the return circuit and back into the hydraulic tank. Now, as far as the spool valve, you'll see this little centering spring contraption on the end, and what it does is it centers the spool back in the neutral position when you let go of the lever. So if you say wanted to shift the spool this way, what happens is this here end, I can't really show you too well, but this end here lives inside this cap. And what'll happen is this cup-shaped piece here on the end, it bottoms out against the end of the cap, and it's hollow inside and it's got some room to come this way. So what'll happen is you shift the spool this way and it pushes down this way here. This thing will slide down the spool shaft like that, compressing the spring here. And then when you let go of it, this thing here will try to go back that way. And of course it can't because the cap of the spool's there. So it'll actually in turn push the whole thing this way again. Now, if you go to move it the other way, this piece here is up against this will be on the other side of this spool, or this valve section, I should say. But this piece here will be up against that, and this piece here will get pushed this way into that thing. And you can see that little gap there is about how much travel it has. And then again, when you let go, it tries to force itself apart, which in turn pulls the whole spool this way. And that is how it returns back to center. Okay, I'm gonna put this back together and I'm gonna install it on the section, or the rest of the sections, and put this whole thing back together, and then we will get into the stabilizer cylinder repair. And there's the valve all put back together again. So from there, we're gonna move on to this guy right here, which is the head of one of the stabilizer cylinders. Now the problem is this here has all been eroded away, and there should be a lip here to hold the outer sleeve, which is right here, onto the cylinder itself. Now, it was still kind of sort of holding it, but as you can see, it's pretty much worn away to nothing. And while I have it apart, I figured I might as well just fix it, and then that way there's no chance of it coming off. So there's a couple things we can do. One is get a whole new head. Problem is they're no longer available, so that means we'd have to get one made. And that won't be cheap, and I'm nowhere near good enough of a machinist to try and attempt to do this myself. Plus I probably don't have all the proper tooling. So what I'm gonna do, I talked to the welding shop here in town, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this down, this surface here, just enough to clean it up. And then what I'm gonna do is I got this piece of aluminum here that I'm just gonna cut a circular piece out of and machine it down to the size of that, and then the outside diameter of this. And then they'll just weld it on for me. And then that should hopefully solve that problem. So I'm gonna get started on that. I'm not gonna film it because I don't know what I'm doing really. And yeah, I'm just gonna try and make it work. And then I'll bring you guys back once I have something that should hopefully work. So see you in a second. Okay, so here's what I've come up with. I've machined this little ring here of aluminum, and I've machined the head of the cylinder down. So what I'm gonna do is take this over to the weld shop, and they'll weld this on here for me. And then once it's all welded on, I'll clean it all up and machine it down to the proper size. That'll be just a couple seconds for you guys, and I'll be back. All right, they finished welding her up. It looks really good. So now all we gotta do is stick it on the lathe, flatten this out here, face it off nice and square, and then turn this down to the diameter of this tube. It doesn't have to hold back any pressure. All it's gonna do is keep this tube from sliding off. So as soon as we're done that, we can put the cylinder back together. All right, got her milled off. Let's see how she fits. I like it. So for those of you wondering how the cylinder gets oil from the base end to this end here, without a tube on the outside, you'll see it's absent. What happens is there's a passage from this here fitting, goes onto the inside of this tube here. And this outer tube is essentially the tube that brings the hydraulic fluid to the head end of the cylinder. You can see the gap here between, this is actually here, this is the bore of the cylinder itself. And then this here is just a sleeve that goes around the outside. And you can see there's a hole right there. And the hydraulic fluid goes from in here through that hole and then into the head end of the cylinder. And that's how it gets the fluid and not having to have an external line on the outside. And the reason they do that is because this whole cylinder assembly has to fit inside a tube that's not much bigger than this. So this way there's nothing on the outside to get in the way. And then all this does here, this head, is this flange here that we had welded on, it just keeps this tube from sliding off. There's gonna be seals right in this area here that'll seal this part to the outside world, and then the cylinder seals themselves for the rod are gonna be in here. And there she is, all back together again. The head looks actually really nice now with it all back to the way it should be. Okay, I'm gonna do the other one. I'll probably do that one off camera, and then we'll get into rebuilding the swing cylinder after that. So here we have the swing cylinder. It's basically two single acting cylinders put together in one. There's the other piece, I just got that one off. And it just pushes this rack back and forth. So we have one side here, the other side there, and this was all full of all kinds of gross stuff, so I'm glad I'm taking this apart. But it just uses this rack, which corresponds to a pinion on the swing post, and that's what swings the machine. So as this moves left and right, these trunnions here are fixed to the mainframe, and then this here moves back and forth in between the two cylinder halves, and that's what gives you your swing. So there's nothing really much to see here. I'm just gonna reseal it, clean everything up, give it a coat of black paint so it matches the mainframe, and put her all back together. So I'll bring you guys back when that's done. So there is a bit more to it than I initially thought. So what we have here is actually a hollow cylinder, and we've got a crossover relief valve in here, which is underneath this roll pin right here. So what it will do is, if for some reason there's a shock load to the side of it, it'll actually allow fluid to get from one side to the other. So there is a bit of a relief crossover and whatnot. And you can see down there, it's kind of dark, but you can see all the way to the other end. And then this little knob here, that's actually a cushioning device. It corresponds, there's a hole way in the back there where the fluid comes in. And as the cylinder gets near the end of its travel, that'll start to go in there and restrict the flow to slow it down so it doesn't slam from one side to the other. But in my memory, from what I remember from 30 some years ago of using one of these, the swing is pretty jerky on these, so we'll see how this one behaves when we get it all done. Anyway, I'm going to tear it down, reseal it, put it all back together, and then I'll bring you guys back. Well, I went ahead and mounted the mainframe back on the machine. I got the swing cylinder all resealed. It's sitting on the bench over there ready to go. And I just cleaned out the bores for the swing post bearings because they forgot to tape those off when they repainted the thing. And I found some nice new bearings for the swing post. Brand new from Bobcat. They actually weren't even all that expensive. And so those will be going in. But first we're going to put the swing cylinder back on. So stay tuned for that. Got the swing cylinder in. Sorry, I didn't film it because it was just too much of a wrestling match. It's not centered up, which I guess is okay, but I do want to get it centered so I can put the boom on nice and straight and I don't have to worry about counting teeth and getting it wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hook that cylinder straight up to the auxiliaries of the Bobcat and just use the power of the Bobcat to move it back and forth. And at the same time, I guess we'll see if it leaks. Stand by. Okay, I got the auxiliaries of the machine hooked to the cylinder. I'm going to fire it up and move it. I probably won't be able to see it from where I am, so yell if you see any leaks or anything like that. Now, did it leak? Ah, looks good and dry, everybody. Haha, I like it. Perfect. And yeah, I was able to see the rack from inside the machine, just barely, but I was able to see it, so that's pretty close to centered. I'm happy with that, so what I'm going to do is now mount the king post. And there we go, the king post is back in. It went in a lot easier than I thought it would. Those nice new bearings, everything lined up nice and good. I gave everything a good solid coating of grease in there. So I'm just going to fire it up right now, move it back and forth, make sure there's no binding or anything like that. And then I'll take those hoses back off, and then probably the next step will be to start plumbing everything in and putting the boom back on. I got one outrigger cylinder in. The other one, I'm still waiting for the head to come back from the machine shop. They did call me, it's ready. I just have to go pick it up, and I'll do that sometime today. But it'll just be a couple seconds for you guys anyway. But I'm going to fire this thing up, and we'll move it back and forth and see how nicely it swings. So I'll just set you guys up right here, and I'll fire this machine up and give her a swing back and forth. Looks like it moves nice and good. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Still no leaks on the swing cylinders. Okay, so yeah, we'll carry on here. I do have to go to work. Once I'm back, I will carry on with this, but that'll just be a couple seconds for you guys, so hang in there. All right, time for some plumbing. I got the boom mounted. It's just pinned in place on the bottom pin. And I'm gonna make all new hydraulic tube lines here because these ones that I have here, they're rusty and I don't really trust them. And rather than waste a bunch of time putting everything together only to find out that it leaks, I'm just gonna make new ones. I did get the tooling in and I got some tubing. I actually already made one tube just to see how it works. I did it off camera, but here it is. And I think it turned out not too bad. So yeah, I'll make a couple more. I'll show you the process on one or two of them. I also got new hydraulic lines here to go from the valve to the quick couplers. There's the valve nicely installed. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and make a couple tube lines here. Well, I just got a pile of hydraulics hoses here, so we can go ahead and put those on next. I'm still working on the tubing here. It's coming along, and I'll show you guys how I make some of the tubing here in a minute. But for now, I'm gonna put these hoses on, and then that way I can actually lift and lower the outriggers already, which will be a big help. Right now I got this thing supported on my little crane because I had to take it off the machine so I have room to work back there with the tube lines. But hopefully I'll get these hoses on, we can hook everything up and see if it actually, how well it works. So stand by. So I got some of the tubing done. Like a rank amateur, I ran out though, I didn't order enough. But part of that is because I thought I would reuse some of the old ones, but I decided against it. So here's what I got done so far. I got the valve in, most of the hard lines done, but there's two still that I still gotta make. So everything else is capped off. And I got some lines run to the front here that are also capped off. But what I wanna do right now is just bring the Bobcat up, hook it up, and see if the stabilizers work. So Eric's gonna drive the Bobcat in here. Hook up the quick couplers, and I got the swing, or not the swing, but the stabilizer levers hooked up. All right, turn the auxiliaries on, Eric. Are they on?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't see anything leaking yet. Let's give this a try here. Something happened. Yeah, look at that. The outrigger leg went up. And then it goes down. And it goes up. Okay. Let's try the other side. That one up backwards. Okay. Bobcat's moaning because there's a bit of air in the system. Okay, so that one's backwards, but that's easy enough to fix. Yeah, it works. What do you think, buddy?
Awesome.
Okay, success. You can turn the auxiliaries off. Okay, there we go. First part is successful. And I don't see any leaks here on the valve, which is wonderful. Okay. And I went ahead and installed the control levers too here while I'm still waiting on the tubing to come in. So I think I'm going to end this video here just because it's getting kind of long again. But once I get some new tubing, I'll probably actually do a tool review of the tools I got for making the tubing. And then we'll go ahead and finish this up and finish the reassembly and try it all out. And then we'll make a separate video. I don't have a bucket for it, so I'll make a separate video of building a bucket for it. But for now, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode. We'll see you then.